The courtroom just witnessed something that has legal experts talking, and it's not what you'd expect. While everyone's been focused on the headlines, Judge Arun Subramanian has been making moves that could completely change how high-profile celebrity trials are handled forever. What just happened in the Sean Combs case isn't just about one man's fate. It's about protecting the very foundation of our justice system from something that's never been more dangerous. Most people think they understand what's happening in this trial, but the real story is being written in legal documents that never make the news. The decisions being made right now in that Manhattan courthouse aren't just about guilt or innocence. They're about whether our justice system can survive the social media age. And Judge Subramanian just made a move that shows he's not playing games. Let's talk about who we're dealing with here. Judge Arun Subramanian isn't your typical federal judge. This is someone who climbed from being a civil attorney who genuinely cared about his clients to presiding over one of the most watched trials in recent history. Before he was making decisions that affect millions of lives, he was the kind of lawyer who would pay for his client's celebratory dinner out of his own pocket. That tells you something about his character, and it explains why he's handling this case the way he is. But here's where things get interesting. Subramanian didn't ask for this case. It landed on his desk like a bombshell. Now he's dealing with a defendant who has more money and influence than most small countries, a media circus that never stops, and legal teams that are willing to try anything to win. The pressure on this judge is unimaginable, yet he's making decisions that show he's thinking about something bigger than just this one trial. The first shocking move came when Subramanian decided something that rarely happens in federal court: complete juror anonymity. We're not just talking about keeping their names out of the papers. These 12 people who hold Sean Combs' future in their hands are identified only by numbers. They go home every night with strict instructions to avoid all news coverage, stay off the internet, and never discuss the case with anyone. That's not normal, and it tells us everything about how dangerous this situation has become. Think about what it means to serve on this jury. You're deciding the fate of someone who controlled an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars, someone whose connections reach into every corner of entertainment, politics, and business, someone whose alleged crimes involve people who are still walking free, still powerful, still dangerous. The judge looked at all of this and decided these jurors needed protection that goes beyond anything we normally see. But the anonymous jury decision reveals something even more disturbing: the complete breakdown of media responsibility in high-profile cases. We're living in an era where every detail, every rumor, every speculation gets broadcast instantly to millions of people. Social media has turned every criminal trial into entertainment, and judges are finally starting to fight back. Subramanian knows that traditional jury instructions to avoid news coverage are meaningless when the coverage never stops. The media contamination problem goes deeper than anyone wants to admit. How do you find 12 people who haven't already formed opinions about someone whose story has been dissected on every platform imaginable? How do you protect them from the constant pressure of public opinion, death threats, and the kind of harassment that comes with these mega cases? The anonymous jury isn't just about protecting their identities, it's about protecting their ability to think clearly about evidence instead of headlines. This brings us to something that happened recently that has legal experts buzzing. Judge Subramanian absolutely lost it in court when sealed information from a private proceeding appeared in a media report. He demanded to know who leaked it, telling the lawyers point blank that someone is lying. This wasn't just about confidentiality. This was about the integrity of the entire process. When sealed information gets leaked, It means someone with access to the most sensitive parts of the case is feeding stories to reporters. The leak incident reveals the real war being fought in this courtroom. It's not just prosecution versus defense. It's the justice system versus a media ecosystem that profits from chaos. Every leaked detail, every exclusive story, every social media hot take makes it harder to conduct a fair trial. Subramanian's furious reaction wasn't about ego. It was about protecting something that's becoming impossible to protect, the space for justice to actually happen. Now, let's talk about what the defense is really doing here. Sean Combs has assembled one of the most expensive legal teams money can buy, and they're not just fighting the charges. They're preparing for every possible scenario. They know that winning at trial is just the beginning. They're already laying groundwork for appeals, for post-conviction challenges, for every legal maneuver that could keep their client out of prison. And Judge Subramanian knows exactly what they're doing. The defense strategy goes far beyond reasonable doubt. They're creating a record that will give them options no matter what happens. Every objection, every motion, every challenge is designed with appeals courts in mind. They're not just trying to convince this jury. They're trying to create legal issues that could overturn any conviction years from now. It's a long game that most people never see, and it explains why trials like this take so long and cost so much. But here's what makes Judge Subramanian different. He's thinking just as far ahead as the defense team. Every decision he makes is bulletproof. Every ruling is backed by solid legal precedent. Every protection he puts in place is designed to survive scrutiny from higher courts. He's not just conducting a trial. He's building a legal fortress that can withstand any appeal, any challenge, any attempt to overturn whatever verdict this jury reaches. The prosecution faces challenges that go way beyond proving their case. They're dealing with a defendant who has spent decades building relationships with people who could influence outcomes. They're fighting against a public relations machine that never stops spinning. They're trying to present evidence while knowing that everything they do will be dissected, criticized, and potentially leaked to the media. It's like trying to perform surgery in a hurricane. What most people don't understand is how much celebrity status complicates everything in the justice system. It's not just about famous lawyers or media attention. It's about how wealth and fame can corrupt the basic mechanics of justice. Witnesses become afraid to testify. Jurors worry about their safety. Court officers deal with security threats they never trained for. Judges face pressure from sources they never expected. The entire system gets warped by the gravity of celebrity, and very few judges know how to handle it. This is where Judge Subramanian's background becomes crucial. He's seen how power works from the inside. He knows how money can influence outcomes. He understands the pressure that gets applied behind the scenes. That's why his decisions seem so calculated to prevent manipulation. He's not just following standard procedures. He's adapting the justice system to handle threats it was never designed to face. The anonymous jury decision also sends a message to future defendants who think their celebrity status will protect them. Subramanian is essentially saying that wealth and fame won't be allowed to intimidate or influence his courtroom. The jurors can focus on evidence because they're protected from the consequences of their decision. It's a revolutionary approach that other judges are already studying and copying. But there's another layer to this story that's even more important. The way this trial is being conducted will set precedents for every celebrity case that comes after it. Future judges will look at what Subramanian did and either follow his example or learn from his mistakes. The decisions being made right now will influence how we handle powerful defendants for decades to come. That's a responsibility that would crush most people, but Subramanian seems to embrace it. The leaked information incident shows us something else. This case involves secrets that certain people are desperate to keep hidden. Someone with access to sealed proceedings risked serious legal consequences to get information to reporters. That doesn't happen unless the stakes are incredibly high. It suggests there are aspects of this case that go far beyond what we're seeing in the courtroom, connections that reach into places most of us can't imagine. Every legal expert who's following this case closely will tell you the same thing. Judge Subramanian is playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. His moves don't always make sense in the moment, but they create a complete strategy for protecting the integrity of the process. The anonymous jury, the strict media controls, the furious reaction to leaks. It's all part of a larger plan to ensure that justice can actually be served despite all the forces working against it. The defense team knows they're facing a judge who won't be intimidated, manipulated, or distracted. That's why they're being so aggressive with their pretrial motions and their media strategy. They understand that traditional approaches won't work in Subramanian's courtroom, so they're trying everything they can think of before the case is decided. It's a desperate strategy, but it's the only one they have. What happens in this courtroom over the next few months will be studied in law schools for generations, not just because of who the defendant is, but because of how the justice system adapted to handle unprecedented challenges. Judge Subramanian isn't just conducting a trial, he's writing a playbook for how democracy protects itself from the corrosive effects of extreme wealth and celebrity. The anonymous jury protection shows us something hopeful about our justice system. Despite all the money, all the influence, all the media manipulation, 12 ordinary citizens still have the power to hold even the most powerful people accountable, but only if they're protected from the consequences of doing their job. Only if judges are willing to make hard decisions about what justice requires in the modern world. The ripple effects of Judge Subramanian's decisions are already being felt across the legal community. Federal judges from coast to coast are watching this case, taking notes on how to handle their own high-profile defendants. The anonymous jury precedent is particularly significant because it addresses a problem that's been growing for years: the impossibility of finding truly impartial jurors in cases involving celebrities, politicians, or viral internet personalities. But let's dig deeper into what anonymous juries really mean for defendants' rights. Defense attorneys argue that anonymous juries create an unfair presumption of dangerousness. They claim it sends a message to jurors that the defendant is so threatening that their identities need protection, which could bias them toward conviction. It's a valid legal argument that appeals courts will definitely consider if this case goes that route. However, Judge Subramanian clearly weighed these concerns against the very real threats that jurors face in cases like this. The prosecution team in this case faces unique challenges that go beyond typical federal criminal cases. They're dealing with alleged crimes that supposedly occurred over decades, involving witnesses who may have been intimidated into silence for years. Some potential witnesses have already faced harassment just for being connected to the investigation. Others have received offers of money to change their stories or refuse to cooperate. The prosecution knows that every witness they call could become a target, and that knowledge affects every strategic decision they make. What makes this even more complex is the international scope of the alleged criminal enterprise. Prosecutors aren't just dealing with crimes that happened in New York or Los Angeles. They're tracking money flows through offshore accounts, following witnesses who've fled to other countries, and coordinating with law enforcement agencies around the world. The evidence trail spans continents and involves financial instruments that most juries have never heard of. Explaining all of this to 12 anonymous jurors while keeping them engaged and helping them understand the bigger picture is an almost impossible task. The defense strategy reveals something fascinating about how modern criminal defense works at the highest levels. They're not just fighting the current charges, they're conducting opposition research on every prosecutor, every judge, every potential witness. They're hiring former FBI agents to investigate the investigators. They're bringing in jury consultants who use psychological profiling and social media analysis to understand how different types of people might react to their client. It's like a political campaign merged with a criminal trial, and the resources being deployed are staggering. One aspect that hasn't gotten enough attention is how this case is changing the relationship between federal judges and the media. Traditionally, judges tried to maintain neutrality by avoiding any commentary on media coverage. But when that coverage threatens the integrity of the trial itself, judges are being forced to take more aggressive stances. Subramanian's angry reaction to the leaked information wasn't just about that specific incident. It was a warning to everyone involved that business as usual won't be tolerated. The technology challenges in this case are unlike anything most courts have ever faced. How do you keep jurors from accidentally encountering information online when algorithms are designed to show people content related to their interests? How do you prevent social media platforms from targeting jurors with ads or content related to the case? How do you handle the fact that case information spreads through private group chats, encrypted messaging apps, and platforms that didn't exist when jury instructions were first written? Judge Subramanian's team has had to become experts in digital security, working with court technology specialists to monitor for potential jury contamination. They're tracking hashtags, monitoring trending topics, and even working with social media companies to flag potential problems. It's an entirely new dimension of trial management that most judges never trained for, but it's becoming essential for any high-profile case. The financial implications of this trial extend far beyond the defendant's personal wealth. We're talking about a criminal enterprise that allegedly generated hundreds of millions of dollars through various illegal activities. The prosecution has to trace this money through shell companies, cryptocurrency transactions, real estate investments, and international transfers. They need to prove not just that crimes occurred, but that specific financial benefits flowed from those crimes. It's like conducting a corporate audit and a criminal investigation simultaneously. Meanwhile, the civil lawsuits related to this case are piling up in courts across the country. Every criminal charge spawns multiple civil claims from alleged victims seeking monetary damages. These civil cases create additional pressure on potential witnesses who know that their testimony in the criminal trial could affect their chances of winning money in civil court. It's a complex web of legal proceedings that all influence each other, and judges have to navigate these conflicts carefully. The international law enforcement cooperation in this case shows how modern criminal enterprises operate across borders. Federal prosecutors are working with authorities in multiple countries to track evidence, locate witnesses, and freeze assets. This involves complex extradition procedures, international treaty obligations, and diplomatic negotiations that happen completely behind the scenes. The public sees a trial in Manhattan, but the real work involves coordination with law enforcement agencies around the world. What's particularly interesting is how this case is exposing the limitations of traditional criminal law when dealing with modern organized crime. The old legal frameworks were designed for more conventional criminal enterprises. Drug cartels, traditional organized crime families, corporate fraud schemes. But when criminal activity is embedded within legitimate entertainment businesses, when it involves complex financial instruments and international networks, when it spans decades and involves hundreds of potential witnesses, the legal system has to adapt in real time. The psychological impact on everyone involved in this trial cannot be overstated. Jurors are dealing with evidence that describes horrific crimes, while knowing that their decision will affect not just the defendant, but potentially hundreds of other people who may be implicated. Court reporters are transcribing testimony that's traumatic to hear. Security personnel are managing threats they never trained for. Even the judge is working under pressure that few people could handle. The witness protection considerations add another layer of complexity. Some potential witnesses are in hiding, others have received round-the-clock security, and some have refused to cooperate entirely because they fear for their safety. The prosecution has to balance their need for testimony against their responsibility to protect people who are brave enough to come forward. This creates strategic challenges that most prosecutors never face. How do you present a complete case when some of your best witnesses are too afraid to testify? The evidentiary challenges in this case are staggering. Prosecutors are dealing with electronic records that span decades, financial documents in multiple languages, audio and video recordings that require extensive authentication, and digital evidence that may have been deliberately altered or destroyed. They need expert witnesses to explain complex financial schemes, technology systems, and criminal methodologies that jurors have never encountered. Every piece of evidence opens up new avenues for defense challenges and appeals. The impact on the broader entertainment industry cannot be ignored. This case is sending shockwaves through music, film, television, and related businesses. People are reevaluating business relationships, reviewing contracts, and distancing themselves from anything that might be connected to the allegations. The financial impact extends far beyond the defendant's personal assets. It's affecting stock prices, business partnerships, and employment decisions across multiple industries. Judge Subramanian's handling of this case is also being studied by international legal experts who deal with similar challenges in their own countries. The anonymous jury model, the strict media controls, and the aggressive approach to preventing leaks could influence how courts around the world handle high-profile cases. Legal systems that traditionally handled celebrity cases differently are now reconsidering their approaches based on what's happening in this Manhattan courtroom. The long-term implications for celebrity accountability are profound. For decades, wealth and fame provided a certain level of insulation from serious criminal consequences. High-powered attorneys, public relations teams, and political connections could often make problems disappear or reduce serious charges to minor penalties. But this case represents a different approach, one where celebrity status might actually increase scrutiny rather than provide protection. As this trial continues, remember that what you're watching isn't just about one person's guilt or innocence. It's about whether our democracy can survive in an age when money and fame can buy almost anything. It's about whether regular people can still stand up to power when they're protected by courageous judges who understand what's really at stake. Judge Subramanian's decisions will echo through our justice system long after this trial is forgotten. And that might be the most important part of this entire story. The next few weeks will show us whether all these protections and precautions were enough. Whether an anonymous jury can focus on evidence instead of celebrity, whether sealed proceedings can stay sealed, whether justice can prevail over influence. But one thing is already clear. Judge Arun Subramanian has shown us what it looks like when the justice system fights back against forces that would destroy it. And that's a victory worth celebrating, no matter what verdict this jury ultimately reaches. The precedent being set in this courtroom will influence American justice for generations. Future defendants, prosecutors, and judges will all look back at this moment as a turning point, the time when the legal system finally adapted to handle the unique challenges of the social media age. Whether that adaptation succeeds or fails, will determine whether we can still have meaningful accountability for the most powerful people in our society. That's what makes this trial truly historic. And that's why everyone should be paying attention to what happens next.